Hi, I'm Ravi Kapoor. I'm an actor, writer, director, and you are listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing.
My name is Abhay, and I share conversations with talented and interesting individuals linked to the global Indian and South Asian community. It's informal and informative, adding insights to our evolving cultural expressions, where each person can proudly say, "Trust me, I know what I'm doing." Hi, everyone. On this episode of Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing, we share a conversation with writer, director, and actor Ravi Kapoor. Stay tuned. So right from the top, a true thanks to you for listening to this, and if you feel compelled to do so, thanks for sharing a kind review or rating, for sharing it with your friends and family, and for following us on social media at Dr. Abhay. It means a lot, and I'm certainly quite grateful. So true to my calling, I am a real doctor, and I don't play one on TV. And some of us doctors transplant things that we hope will allow for a successful coexistence and even bring a new home and new life to both the host and the transplanted guest. Now, for writer, director, and actor Ravi Kapoor, who was born and raised in Liverpool, England, art and performance were certainly part of his formative years. Ravi trained at the East 15 School of Acting and worked extensively in the UK before moving to Los Angeles in 2001. He was a series regular on Gideon's Crossing and Crossing Jordan and appeared in a number of short films and movies. His first feature as a director was the comedy drama Miss India America, a film he co-wrote with his wife, actor Meera Simhan. And last year, he wrote and directed his second feature, a comedy heist film set in the Little India neighborhood of Artesia, California. Now for me, the film offers a playful and very organic coming-of-age window into Southern California Indian American life that I've certainly experienced myself. And Ravi's style of storytelling that combines a little Wes Anderson with highlighting those who typically don't have a voice, with the occasional laddoo eating contest, is always compelling enough. Four Samosas premiered at Tribeca and was picked up by IFC Films, so you can check it out on most of your favorite streaming options. We caught up for a conversation, which makes sense, I guess, because he's portrayed a shocking number of doctors on TV as an actor. And so I asked him about being a British transplant in LA and whether perhaps he thinks Britishly first, even though he's been here for over 25 years.
I've been here in the Valley for almost 25 years now, in Los Angeles and America for 25 years. So I almost feel like I've been here almost as long as I had been in England to some degrees. And I actually feel like I've become a little bit more American than I have English now. I think my viewpoint and my entire world and my community is here now in so many ways. I still have a little bit of the English accent, and I feel like I can transcend both worlds. But I feel a little bit more out of touch with the UK side of myself a little bit.
Is that, I mean, obviously there's a time factor there, but are there some things that perhaps you miss about being in England or in the UK that you just simply can't duplicate?
Yeah, I would say in terms of, I'm in the storytelling business, and I miss a little bit of the focus of the storytelling in the UK, which tends to be a little bit more targeted on examining social issues, examining the political with a small p in terms of who we are as a culture in the UK. Here, there's a little bit more of an emphasis on the entertainment side of it, and I don't think it's cut and dry. I think it's just about where the greater weight is put on that style of storytelling. So I miss that about the UK a little bit in terms of the focus of the storytelling.
And are there cultural aspects or entertainment aspects about growing up in the UK that you're perhaps nostalgic about that maybe somehow find their way into some of the storytelling that you do?
I definitely think there's an aspect in the comedy, which I think a lot of people talk about the British humor, and I've never really been able to completely identify it, because you find it in the US as well. But I think if you had to, there's a certain hangman's humor, and there's a little bit of a dryness, and there's also a little
Yeah.
bit of a cutting down humor where
Yeah.
nobody is ever really allowed to think of themselves as being too important or too big. And I think that's
Yeah.
particularly also a very northern English thing as well. And I'm from
Sure.
Liverpool.
Yeah.
And there is a little bit of who do you think you are? Hey,
Yeah.
hey, don't get
Yeah.
too big
Yeah.
for your boots, mate.
That's
There's
right.
definitely a bit of that going on.
Well, and I wonder if at the same time, like there's the in fact joy of that kind of either comedy or the baseline foundation of like, hey, listen, don't get too big for yourself, right? Like, don't break your hand patting yourself on the back kind of thing. And at the same time, is that something that while that brings a little bit of value and some perhaps even joy to the work that you do, is that one of the things that perhaps you don't miss so much about England?
The constant put downs.
Right.
In some ways, yeah, there is definitely, especially I think on the West Coast here in California, there's a general vibe of positivity. I mean, again,
Yeah.
it's a generalization, but I remember first coming here and people just in an elevator would just go, "Hey, how you doing?" And I'm like, "What do you want? What do you
It's
want from
like,
me?"
what? Why?
And
What?
it's
Right.
like, "Why are you talking to me? What's going on?" And whereas in the UK, there's always an initial difficulty in terms of connecting, but once you've had a couple of drinks, it's like Bob's your uncle and the world is your oyster in
That's
terms
right.
of relationships. Um, but there's a general vibe of connection and feeling okay, here, which
Yeah.
I kind of really appreciate as well.
I wonder if that there's always a mixture, right? That like the idea of friendliness versus people who are kind of standoffish. There's probably more friendly people in the places that you think are standoffish, and there are probably more standoffish people in the places that you think that are friendly. But you're right that the vibe actually does kind of make a difference, especially when you're trying to create things.
Yeah, yeah, and also I think in some ways with the UK as well, and in Liverpool as well, I maybe didn't always see what was there as well. I didn't see the
Mm.
friendliness that really existed, and the kindness and the sense of generosity that really exists in a city like Liverpool. I think I sometimes when I was there, I would kind of focus on the negative aspects as well. I would focus
Yeah.
on the aggression or the racism or the attacks, and it would mitigate or it would make me blind to what was very positive there as well, which is a kindness, which is a great sense of humor as well.
We were just chatting that our kids are almost the same age and you're a dad now. Do you think your kids have a sense of that kind of contrast that, that's a different world that you grew up in and perhaps have a different sense of what that kind of edginess or for that matter, what the generosity and the giving were in that era, in that time frame compared to what they're experiencing now? In fact, what they're experiencing now through you and your art.
hmm I think it's really interesting. It's like I feel like my oldest kid has really somehow picked up on the dry English humor, on the
Yeah,
very kind of the undercutting kind of humor. I don't know where I
sure.
got it
Yeah.
from, but I maybe he just got it from me, or he picked it up tangentially somehow. But I do often think in terms of I go, God, would my kids survive in the UK if they grew up in the UK?
Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
you transported them back there, because it is a very different atmosphere. It's a very different place, and my kids are so Californian in that sense, and
Right.
it's if the sun isn't shining, then the world is falling down a little
Correct.
bit,
But
and
I imagine that people have resilience in different ways, and you throw them into different environments, and they adapt and they become more versatile.
yeah, I mean, it's like we were just talking about my older kid is in New York now, and I've been surprised how much he's taken to the city, and how
Yeah.
much he can handle the rough and tumble of it, and the cold as well. And yeah, in some ways he has surprised me. It's like maybe they're not as soft as I thought they were.
And I think that like you hear that from people on the East Coast and West Coast or people coming from India versus, in California that like, oh God, what do you mean you don't hang out with your neighbors? Or what do you mean you don't do this? And the culture is always so different. I was thinking about this because I think the greater Indian diaspora in places like England or Africa or, the sort of global diaspora are just so different when it comes to being South Asian definitely anywhere outside of the United States because of a perhaps more mature, more evolved sense of community with several more generations as a backdrop. So does storytelling now for you, for these audiences, become different? Meaning that, like, the storytelling that you're doing for the Indian American audience would be definitely different for perhaps how you would tell a story for the British Indian audience or the African.
Yeah, for sure. I remember when I first came here, I had a real struggle to begin with in terms of trying to figure out who my audience was and what the stories were, because
Yeah,
it was a different upbringing and it was a different history with the community of South Asians here and in America and this community in the UK. Obviously, also in the UK, there was a real working class community a lot more. It was a real
yeah,
blue collar community and immigrant community, including my parents. You know, my dad worked on the railways and worked in a factory and did all that kind of stuff. Whereas here in the US, generally, initially, it was more of an educated South Asian immigration that
sure.
happened here. There were the doctors and lawyers and engineers. So the storytelling was very different as well. And then when I was growing up in the UK in the 80s and 90s, there was a real sense of pride about the British Asian culture, and there
Yeah,
was a real sense of um, identity call out and claiming of the music and the fusion of the arts and theater and film and television. There was a real sense of this is me and this is who we
yeah,
are, and a sense of pride. And then when I came here, obviously, we had been here, like you say, for fewer generations,
yeah,
and also it was a different kind of community. It was more sporadic. It was more spread out. There wasn't a real sense of cohesiveness and identity in some ways. And so it did take me a good moment, a good couple of years to really figure out what are the stories here and how can I tell them and what's my in on the stories as well. And I would have to say a lot of my in ended up becoming through my wife Mira, who's an actor and a writer,
yeah,
and finding my way in through her stories. And so initially, like my first feature, Miss India America, we wrote together. It was based a little bit more on her, the environment she grew up in Orange County, and being from more of that kind of class of South Asian people. So it's I think very definitely different stories, and it definitely took me a moment to figure out what the stories were here.
You're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. After a quick break, we'll come back to our conversation with writer, director, and actor Ravi Kapoor. Stay tuned. Conversation. It's the antidote to apathy and the catalyst for relationships. I'm Abhay Dandekar, and I share conversations with global Indians and South Asians so everyone can say, "Trust me, I know what I'm doing." New episodes weekly, wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tam France, and you are listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing.
Welcome back to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. Let's rejoin our conversation now with Ravi Kapoor.
and because your experience definitely was sort of a coming of age experience in that sort of mid 90s, early 2000s era, and building more community in that way, has it also been different through the storytelling with you and your wife? And even now as a parent, have you gotten a different sense of kind of that contrast, and has it blended? Has it blurred in some ways for how you think now?
I think it has, because I even think about my second feature, Four Samosas. In some ways, it's dealing with more of a working class community within California. The
Yeah,
characters are all living on the fringes. They're not the rich, well-to-do kind of people. Their parents are not engineers and doctors. So I think that there has been a greater class of a blue collar working class South Asian community that's kind of been built up here. Driving
yeah,
cabs and working in the stores. And so in some ways I see myself in their stories more than I see myself in the
yeah,
other stories a little bit more, which has allowed me to kind of dip in to those worlds a little bit more, and even kind of dip into to looking at some of the initial stories of the Gujaratis coming into this country and opening up
yeah.
motels and everything as well. Those are the kind of things that trigger my imagination and I have a sense of connection to, I think, because of my upbringing. And also, I have to say, I would love to go back to the UK and tell stories there again, and
Yeah.
look back at my history there and see how it impacted me and what it meant for my generation and my parents' generation coming into the
Mm.
UK.
And I wonder if the stories that you're telling of this particular aspect of being an Indian American, and even in that from your lens of things, I wonder in sharing with some of your colleagues and friends in England, how that resonates. Like, do they actually share the same kind of vibrancy and saying, oh yeah, this actually is something of quite, high value and interest to us? Or is that sort of like, but that's old hat. We've been there and done that so many times.
It's really interesting because we took the film Four Samosas out to a festival in London, Rain Dance Film Festival, and there was a bunch of people that I knew that I hadn't seen for many years that came to see the film, and a lot of South British Asians, as we're called over there, and they would kind of watch the film and they were like, oh, there was a real sense of, in some ways, surprise, I think,
Yeah.
about who we are here as South Asian Americans, American South Asians.
Yeah.
Getting my terminology is all messed up.
Yeah.
I think I don't know if there was so much a sense of connection and going, yeah, I recognize that. It was almost like, oh, you guys are a little different, aren't you? You're a little different from us. There's a little bit of a different vibe about who you are and what you are. So I think that there's a little bit of connection, but I also think there is a different upbringing.
Yeah.
There's a different experience, I think.
Almost like celebrating that nuance a little bit, but at least recognizing it and, not perhaps scoffing at it and just sort of like not being open to saying, hey, this is something that I would love to learn about.
Yeah.
I'm curious about one thing. You spent a lot of time as an actor and sort of playing a lot of relatively stereotypical or formulaic roles, right? I mean, a doctor, a terrorist, a swami or imam, and gas station attendant, etc. As you reflect back on all those roles, but now thinking, given where Hollywood and Indian America or South Asian America are right now, what are some of your thoughts and reflections on how that evolution has happened?
Yeah, I have played a lot of doctors.
Yeah,
yeah, I played a lot of doctors. They should just give me a degree and get it over with now, a
that's right. Yeah,
PhD or whatever. I should an MD, sorry, and I should just go out there and practice. It's in some ways, I think you see it in every kind of immigrant community, and you see it in every country as well. There's a journey that needs to be taken by certain people that need to lay the groundwork, and that just because of where the culture is at. And before my generation of actors that were here, there were other South Asian actors that were there before me as well.
sure.
And you have to honor that to some degrees in terms of what they had to go through because of where the culture was at and was way more limited and narrow than what we had. Now, when I look at the generation below us in terms of what they are able to do and the kind of roles that are being written for them and they are creating for themselves, it is become night and day. It's the world seems to be their oyster now, and I think particularly over the past couple of years, as the culture has changed and people have become more open to stories from other communities, there's definitely a sense of excitement about the possibilities of what they can do. What was available to us when we first started working here, which was 25 years ago or whatever, we were having to fit into quite a narrow box. And the thing I know for me, and I know for a lot of actors in my generation, we had to not think we were just playing stereotypical roles. We always had to think, I've been given a role, how do I make this role human? How do I make this, how do I give history to this character? How do I make it feel like this isn't just about a profession that I'm portraying, but it's actually a full human being with a full background? And so we always had to, even though from the outside there was a sense of a narrow box, we had to just fill it. We had to continually fill it, and part of that was, we had, in some ways, we had to be good. We had to be good at those roles even, and in order to, the next person that came along would be trusted a little bit more as well. And we didn't do it necessarily for the future generations. We were doing it for ourselves, for survival. But for that survival, we had to be as good as we possibly could, and we had to make these characters as deep as we could as well.
Yeah.
And it still exists. I'm still playing a shit ton of doctors. It's like, don't get me wrong. It's like,
Yeah. That part maybe won't end so fast, right?
I know. I mean, I hope it does. But again, if I play a doctor, though, I'm gonna know who my doctor is and where he's coming from and what he's feeling and what his history is.
We appreciate the empathy. But I have to ask you this, a kind of a tangential thought here, and bear with me for this. I was listening to Charles Barkley the other day on one of the NBA shows, and he clearly was either upset or very much taken aback with the difference between what his generation of athletes had to put up with in the NBA and what they did, playing all 82 games and going through all kinds of stuff, and today's NBA athlete who is doing load management and taking nights off and not necessarily playing every game and that kind of thing. And that exists in every profession. I mean, doctors of my generation, we worked 80 hours and climbed uphill, both ways to work and that kind of thing, versus people today. Is there any sense of that in the industry where there's just kind of like, look, I had to go through some stuff as an actor in my generation or for generations before that, where there's sort of this kind of like, yes, we are still perhaps locked into our tribes and we do have that sense of difference between what it was like to be an actor then versus what it's like now. And boy, you guys really have no idea what it was all about. And it's a disservice and that kind of thing. I mean, I hope that makes some tangential sense what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, I think, sometimes we look at the generation below us in terms of within the South Asian acting community, and some people kind of recognize the history of who came before them and who came before us as well.
Yeah.
Some don't and think they're inventing the wheel and they're the very first, and they look at us also maybe in a dismissive way and go, oh, how could you do that? How could you how could you play the doctor, or how could you do the accent? For some people, there is a sense of they're the first, the best, and the brightest, and that they're gonna break it all down, break the walls down. Nobody breaks the walls down in one go. It's like we've all been chipping away at it, and we took a couple of bricks down, and then the next generation will take some more bricks, and hopefully eventually there won't be a wall. But so some people get it, some people don't, and it's not my job as well to kind of point it out. It's like you know it or you don't know, if you care or you don't care.
You're not going to be the Charles Barkley of the group, or
no. And it's like all I can do is just kind of keep doing my work and continue to try and stay relevant in this world that we have right now. And unless it helps me, I kind of create more work and continue to be excited about the work that I'm doing, then it's kind of like they know it or they don't know it, and Godspeed to them. And I hope they do, tear down the wall.
You made Miss India America about 8 years ago, and I'm curious for you, what was that transition like, going from acting to directing?
I've always been writing and directing as well. I wrote and directed plays in the UK. So when I actually came to the US, I actually thought I was going to be a writer. But again, through this whole thing of not really knowing what my stories were here, I ended up going back into acting. And then I made the transition in terms of directing and writing for film. I was on a TV show as a series regular called Crossing Jordan for 6 years, and I started shadowing on that show in the penultimate season, and then they gave me an episode to direct in the final season. And so that in some ways became my film school education, was being on that show constantly on set every day, and then shadowing these directors and working the process from the very beginning to the very end. And I kind of came away going, oh, I want to continue this, and this is fantastic, but I want to really figure out what my own stories are. And so I went away and started doing shorts, and I wrote and directed a couple of shorts that did well at festivals, and then eventually got to Miss India America. And I always feel that writing and directing aspect for me, having done it in the theater as well, I've always loved that. I've always kind of felt like it's used the most part of me. I think it demands so much more of your imagination or my imagination. and of your skill sets just as a person that's dealing with other human beings in the creative community that you have. So it's I definitely feel a greater sense of reward in terms of personally and fulfillment with the writing and directing. It's something that I'm passionate about and excited about doing, and wanting to continue doing that.
When you made that film and made that transition then, and bringing a sort of different gratification, a different joy, how was that perhaps related to, or for that matter, how did it prepare you in that sort of arc to then go on and make Four Samosas?
It was interesting with Miss India America because, like you said, I think we shot her about 8 years ago, and it got released about 7 years ago, 6-7 years ago. And I feel in some ways we were a little bit ahead of our time to some degree, as if we were making a South Asian feature, which was female forward in many ways as well. All our main characters were female. It wasn't about identity. It wasn't about am I Indian, am I American. We kind of decided to move on from that and just make an authentic story about this girl growing up in Orange County and dealing with this issue, this coming of age issue she had, and trying to grow as a human being. We kind of now talk about, God, if we'd made that film, 3 years or 4 years later, when the whole culture kind of opened up, it would have done so much better. But what it did kind of make me realize was a couple of things. One, that there is power in the community of South Asian storytellers, and for me as a creative, that there is support there that maybe exists more stronger than in the wider community. That people want to see South Asian stories as well. That people are hungry for them. And it also made me kind of go, oh, I should also kind of lean in. I later came to realize that I needed to lean in a little bit more to my own very specific quirks of storytelling that I want to do as well. Yeah. But it's a film that we love, and a film that I'm proud of, and the cast is friggin' incredible. And yeah, it's a fun coming of age comedy that we're really, really proud of.
You're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. After a quick break, we'll come back to our conversation with writer, director, and actor Ravi Kapoor. Stay tuned. Every story told is a lesson learned, and every lesson learned is a story waiting to be told. I'm Abhay Dandekar, and I share conversations with global Indians and South Asians so everyone can say, trust me, I know what I'm doing. New episodes weekly, wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Hi, my name is Priya Arora, and I'm an editor, writer, critic, and activist. And you're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing.
Hey there, and welcome back to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. I'm Abhay Dandekar, and let's rejoin our conversation now with Ravi Kapoor.
The realization that allowing for some of your quirks, and to some degree sort of like having the licensure and the agency to let those quirks blossom a little bit, was that necessary in being able to now say that, hey, especially for Four Samosas and the process, in writing and directing that one, do you feel that those quirks were able to now come out?
Yeah, and in some ways it was about me going back to my short films that I'd done before Miss India America. It was kind of returning to those that style of storytelling that I kind of had a strong sense of enjoyment. And it was about that process as well of between Miss India America and doing the second film. I've been trying to get a bigger budget movie off the ground, or a couple of them, and they almost happened. They didn't happen. And a large chunk of time had passed by that point, and it had led me to a point of kind of frustration of going, what's going on? Why am I not making? Right. Why am I not making more? Why haven't I done anything for a while? And how do I make something, and make something that I maybe it's just about making something that I really want to see, and really kind of pushing into that. And I in some ways the mantra that kind of came up in my head was about just making the film for myself and for nobody else, not imagining an audience out there to watch it. And maybe a couple of other people would really like it. And if that's so, that's great. And and it's interesting when you do that you begin to see that there's a tribe out there that you never knew existed for you, that
Yeah.
there's a group of people with like-minded sensibilities that might want to come along for the journey as well. So I think the frustration of those 6 years of not making anything and trying to make, and also those 6 years of trying to make something that I thought other people would like, as opposed to trying to make something that I would really like, was a big transition for me.
Did that idea and concept and confidence in making a film that's really about you and what you like, and even the frustration of that time gap and some of the efforts and the challenges that you were overcoming in that time gap, did that help you pitch a film like Four Samosas, which is an Indian American playful heist film, to investors and distributors? How did that kind of, in some ways, fuel or accelerate the journey, especially when you were trying to pitch this film?
Yeah, it is interesting because I think it does come across. I think your passion for anything that you want to do and you want to create always does come across. And so, especially when you're pitching a film to, and we had it was all private equity investment, so we were going to people and saying, "Hey, give me some of your hard-earned dollars, and
Yeah.
we want to make this feature, and this is why we feel like we should do it." That in some ways you can't hide, and you have to your truth will come out because people will question it, and
Right.
they will look you in
Yeah.
the eye and go, "Really? You really want to make this film? Do you really believe it's gonna do okay?" And while we never know if it's gonna do okay, all we can say is, I really feel like this is a movie that I can bring my heart to, and I think I know I'm going to enjoy it, and I'm hopeful that other people are going to enjoy it too. But I think definitely the desire to make something very specific was very strong in me.
I mean, and that's sort of a compelling contrast, though, right? Making a movie that you really feel proud of, that is, your heart is in the art, and that you made for yourself, but at the same time, you have to be mindful of perhaps what investors and equity is out there is going to also kind of align and build allyship with that. Is there a significant tension there that is sort of always going to be at odds with each other?
I think there is a dance that you have to dance when
Yeah.
you're pitching things and you're looking for to bring people along with you on a journey. You have your deeper desires, and then you have to figure out how does it align with other people's desires. And obviously for
Yeah.
an investor, the reason why they might invest in a movie is it might be because they want to see the story told, and they want to see more South
Yeah.
Asian stories, or they may want to make some money back.
Yeah.
And so you have to figure out how does your desire align with their desire. And so it's not like we go into making a film and saying that we expect it to fail. And
Of
we
course.
go into it going, we really hope this hits a zeitgeist, and
Yeah.
and gets us somewhere. But we're not going to do it by trying to preempt what we think everybody is going to want to watch, because I just don't think you can. I think that our field is littered with an attempt to pre-game what we think is going to be successful.
Sure.
And when you do that, you're as likely to succeed and fail as if you made something that you just really believed in.
Let me ask you this. Have you ever been in a laddu eating contest? And for that matter, have you ever been in a laddu eating contest with an investor?
no,
Maybe that should just be the pitch.
That's great. Yeah, I'll tell you. Yeah, that would be a great pitch. If I can eat more laddus than you have to give me.
Then you have to give me your money.
You have to invest.
Right.
Oh God, I think I would probably lose that one though, Abhay.
Yeah, I'm not sure. As a physician, I may not recommend that, but it would certainly be a lot of fun.
There's a lot of ghee in those laddus, right?
There you go. You've got this great, almost whimsical ode to Artesia Boulevard and Indian America, especially in Southern California, but that there are definitely some undertones and themes of, like you said, sort of like this is a working class set of characters. There's definitely some themes of wealth distribution and class and equity, even within the movie. Are there some important? Was that important for you to make sure that that was part of the movie, or was that just sort of a natural byproduct of your own storytelling?
I think it was just a natural byproduct. I wasn't looking to make any big political kind of commentary.
Yeah.
With it, I think my natural tendency is to identify with the outsiders and with the people on the edges and the fringes, and just find them just generally more interesting. And I'm fascinated to know how do we turn the people who don't have a given sense of power. How do we make them the kings and queens of our
Mm.
stories? How do we make them the heroes and the heroines of our stories? How do we make the man on the street who's in a wheelchair making his journey to the local store for his pint of milk? How do we make that journey epic? His
Yeah.
journey an epic journey, and recognize the heroicism in that as well. So that's my natural tendency to look at those characters and want to know how do I elevate them. And so I think that just happened very naturally.
Almost a great amplification, but that just sort of inherently is woven into the film, perhaps instead of being completely intentional.
Yeah, for sure. And if people gain something from that,
Yeah.
or a sense of empathy, and for somebody who they don't know normally in society or don't kind of connect with, then great,
Yeah.
that's fantastic.
I read a piece where you were quoted as saying that the very act of expression through art can give a sense of value. At this stage in your career, now as a director and a writer and an actor, are you finding even more joy that sparks and speaks to the content and the nuance and the quality of that act, that therefore brings even more value to the work that you're doing and your sort of ongoing aspirations?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. It's as an artist, we have this desire to express ourselves, but also we live in this world and we need to make money as well. We need to make a living as well. So
Yeah.
we're always trying to figure out how do we find that balance. Um, but I do recognize the value the art gives me on an intrinsic level of just my sense of self-worth. And
Yeah.
I think that even people who are not professional storytellers or artists or musicians, but who do engage with an art form in one way or another, either as somebody who's deeply loves to go watch something, or plays an instrument just for 10 minutes a day as a way of connecting with something. I do believe that art can give us a sense of ourselves as individuals and ourselves as worthwhile human beings on this planet in this moment in time as well, and make us feel more than just another cog in the wheel. I
Mm.
do think it's incredibly powerful art in terms of being able to make us feel special for a moment, even if nobody's watching us.
Is the act of that creation, or the act of that engagement, as you said, in art, is that as valuable, or in a parallel way, is the art itself of even greater value? Does it have to be mutually exclusive?
Yeah, I think so. If you can then share that art, and other people connect to it as well, then yeah, that in some ways you're not you yes, you're commodifying that piece of art by putting it out there, but you're also often you're not commodifying it because you don't get any money for it, but
Right.
what you're then doing is creating community with that art as well, which is
Yeah.
the other byproduct of creating art, is
Yeah.
that I think we do most of the things that we do in order to connect with other human beings, and therefore to create community in one form or another. So then when we take that art out there, we're intrinsically saying, hey, this is me, I exist, this is who I am, and see me. And I think we're all just saying,
Right.
see me, and then I
Yeah.
see you and you see me, and this is one way of doing it. And
Right.
art isn't the only way of saying, hey, see me. It's like you're a
Yeah.
pediatrician and you're saying, see me and see my value and see what I can contribute as well to this
Sure.
world. So there are many forms and ways of doing
Yeah.
it, but I think art is obviously an incredibly powerful way to do that.
Well, we're appreciative of it. We hope that the community continues to help celebrate it and that it brings great joy and value to you and yours. Ravi, thanks so much for joining us. What a terrific treat to chat with you, and I hope we can do it again soon.
Oh, that would be amazing. Thank you, Abhay, and I appreciate you having me on.
Thanks so much, Ravi. You know, in the end, let's just make it simple for everyone. We really do need each other, and we really don't need guns. And with more guns, pretty soon we won't have each other. Till next time, I'm Abhay Darndekar.